everybody. I've got chocolate on the left and Fluffy on the right, and they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I love them so much. And here for you guys who have been asking, where are they? There's Fluffy. There's Chocolate. And they are now 1 year old, and I love them dearly. And I'm going to let them down, and we'll see. Who knows? Fluffy may be up on the bookshelf at some point. But I'm going to move the microphone over so that Lori and Michael have audio. And it's so interesting now because we had summer light like 2 weeks ago, and now we have darkness at 7:30. And we were supposed to have rain, thunder, lightning, wind tonight. And I thought, oh no, 3 weeks in a row. But it turned out to be just exquisite, absolutely gorgeous. Nothing is moving, everything is still. And so, hopefully, all of you out there and me here tonight on my Earthfiles YouTube channel, that we will be able to take a journey into a couple of the more interesting science stories that have emerged this week. And that I am doing this on purpose because there is so much that has piled up on animal mutilations, on the strange sunspot observatory mystery. Neither one of those are closed stories. And what I'm going to do, because there are so many new ingredients, I'm going to highlight it again next week here on the Earthfiles YouTube channel. But I would like everybody to know that tomorrow night I am doing 3 hours live on Coast to Coast AM, and that I will be sharing some of the breaking news that has been in just the last 3 days out of England and out of some very fascinating insights that I have gained on the solar observatory. And that if you tune in to what I'm doing at Coast to Coast tomorrow night, and you look at the in-depth reports that I'll have at earthfiles.com, you will really, really be ready to go the further distance that I'm going to go on the YouTube channel next week, which I think is October 3rd, that Wednesday. So, kind of weaving all of these different facets of work. And one of the things that to keep in mind is that I have been, as everybody knows, sort of mildly joking about a couple of bets that I have that by New Year's Day 2019, that we will have had that worldwide headline that we're not alone in this universe. I and a lot of people are becoming so impatient for that to happen because it is so silly for us to be on a planet denying that we have other intelligences in this universe. And so no matter what happens, what I'm becoming aware of every day is the increasing number of reports in very credible science journals and incredible reporting about objects in our solar system itself, and objects beyond in the Milky Way. Increasing numbers of papers and articles. And so whatever happens, we are at a time where exploration beyond our planet is becoming exciting news for scientists as well as for the general public. And after I go through this, what I think are really, really fascinating stories tonight, I would like to reach a point where I'll ask Lori to get questions, and we will go into questions together also after these interesting science reports. And it's one of my most favorite parts of doing this Earthfiles YouTube channel. So many of you are out there are really thinking, you're really paying attention, and you're sending not only great questions, but some of you are sending me great tips and great observations. And I want to thank all of you. And I hope that our audience will continue to keep getting greater and going around the world. I have started for the first time getting emails that somebody has sent to me from, let's say, South Korea or someplace in the Baltics or somewhere. And they are saying that they have gone to Google Translation in order to send emails. And it is fascinating when we realize that our human mind, made up of 7.2 billion minds, there are so many people who are having experiences with high strangeness, and they are reaching out now, maybe for the very first time in their lives, to some of us, because the mysteries are so deep and so great, and we need to have a dialogue with each other in order to grow and learn. So now, let's start with what NBC News did an update about yesterday, and this was their headline. Scientists find the home of the mysterious Oumuamua Space Object. Remember, it was a year ago. It was October 19th, 2017. Astronomers around the world were stunned that what they had called was the first interstellar object to be seen by human eyes. That was a quote from scientists back a year ago in October. And the reason that it was immediately considered to be interstellar was because it was moving so fast relative to our sun when it first showed up. And because the Oumuamua object was first discovered by an astronomer at an observatory in Hawaii, it was given the Hawaiian name Oumuamua, which translates as a scout or a leader in battle. Now, you can see illustrations of it and its bizarre orbital path in my Earthfiles science archives, where there are now more than 2,600 in-depth reports in science and in environment and real X-Files at my website. And the orbital graphic that was prepared by NASA and JPL shows that Oumuamua approached from above our solar system. You can see the yellow line coming down. Here's the plane of our solar system where the planets are. Oumuamua comes like this. And when you read what the scientists said at the time, it was described, this approach, from above our solar system as, quote, the most extreme orbit on record. This sort of long cigar-shaped object was calculated at first traveling 56,880 miles an hour as it came in from above. And then to everyone's surprise, the object changed course, traveling at nearly 60,000 miles an hour. So it's coming this way, and then it does a hairpin turn. And that caught everybody's attention, including the director of the Harvard Astronomy Department, Avi Loeb, and he and others got together and had meetings about anything that could be coming in that fast, do a hairpin turn. Maybe it was intelligent. Maybe Oumuamua was artificial intelligence exploring our solar system. And when it did the hairpin turn, it then increased its speed to 97,200 miles an hour. That's 27 miles a second. And stunned scientists then, sitting back, looking at this, never seeing anything like this before, they hypothesized that the orbit and the speed changes were caused by outgassings if Oumuamua were a comet or an asteroid with lots of ice that was melting as it warmed up during its trip past our sun and coming toward the Earth before it took this hairpin turn. Well, Professor Loeb at Harvard told me in an interview last year that he and other astronomers wanted to listen for any signals that were coming from Oumuamua because there were a lot of speculations that it might be artificial in origin and that the scout, it might be like a scout craft that was camouflaged to look like maybe a long asteroid or a comet. And the way that he and others described this object, and they've described it verbally, but they say they never got any photographs. The way it's described verbally, Oumuamua was a dark red color and estimated to be about 800 feet long, 100 feet wide in diameter, so long and narrow. It was rotating or tumbling as it moved forward rapidly, and that implied to scientists that it had a relatively high density and was perhaps made of metal. What was it, and where did it come from? Well, astronomers are still arguing about whether it was an asteroid or a cometary body, but now the new headlines this week is that the new observational data that the European Space Agency has been able to do by using a computer that they couldn't do last year, they have now taken the speed and the place where it did that hairpin curve and backed up the timeline, and now the computer has identified 4 different dwarf stars, and that any one of the 4 dwarf stars could be where Oumuamua might have originated. And the scientists speculate that whichever is the home star, Oumuamua might have been some kind of big orbiting object there that got kicked out of that planetary system by strong gravitational forces of some kind of a giant planet there, and they estimate more than 1 million years ago. They actually think it was between 1 million and 7 million years ago that this strange Oumuamua, at one of these dwarf stars, something happened and it starts moving and it becomes an interstellar object, the first the human eyes in the science world had ever seen, comes swishing through past our sun and does this strange hairpin turn, which might have been related to a gravitational relationship here in our solar system. Now, this new data is from ESA, or the European Space Agency's spacecraft known as Gaia. It's a space observatory, and it has been gathering data from more than 1 billion stars in our Milky Way galaxy. It has ended up with much more data than anybody had a year ago. And when Gaia ran this, Oumuamua ended up on a 1 million to 7 million year old timeline. They ran it back, and it took the object, the Oumuamua, back within a couple of light years between this 1 in 7 million years on the timeline and where these 4 dwarf stars are. One astronomer at the Max Planck Institute for Astronomy in Heidelberg, Germany, is team leader of this orbital calculation on Oumuamua, and his name is Corin Baylor-Jones. He says that an interstellar object like Oumuamua could show us how our solar system compares to another if we had the ability to grab a piece of it when it went speeding past last October. But as Professor Avi Loeb told me at Harvard, one of the big disappointments is that nobody got any images and nobody got any spectroscopic data, is what he said. That it snuck in from above and it was moving so fast and then increased in its speed. Well, another startling headline this week, quote, "A new study shows that the breakdown of water molecules trapped in ancient Martian rocks likely produced enough chemical energy to sustain microorganisms for hundreds of millions of years beneath the red planet's surface." This is a really straightforward, serious scientific study. It was published recently in Earth and Planetary Science Letters by graduate student Jesse Tarnas at Brown University. And his title on his paper, quote, "Ancient Mars had right conditions for underground life." And here is what Brown University printed on September 24th, this week, about this new paper that has been published in an extremely credible science journal. A new study shows that the breakdown of water molecules trapped in ancient Martian rocks likely produced enough energy to sustain microorganisms for hundreds of millions of years beneath the red planet's surface. And it says, quoting now from Jesse Tarnas's paper that was published in the current issue of Earth and Planetary Science Letters. We know on Earth that we are home here to what are known as subsurface lithotropic microbial subsystems, ecosystems. They live underground. And they lack energy from sunlight, but these subterranean microbes on Earth often get their energy by peeling electrons off of molecules in their surrounding environments. And dissolved molecular hydrogen is a great electron donor and is known to fuel these underground microbes on Earth. Well, this new study having to do with Mars and what could have been life underground there shows that a process through which radiation breaks water molecules into their constituent hydrogen and oxygen would have created plenty of hydrogen in the ancient Martian subsurface. And the researchers estimate that hydrogen concentrations in the crust around 4 billion years would have been in the range of concentrations that sustain microbes on Earth right now, today. Here is a quote. "The findings don't mean that life definitely existed on ancient Mars, but they do suggest that if life did indeed get started, the Martian subsurface had the key ingredients to support microbial life underground for hundreds of millions of years." And this work also has implications for future Mars missions, suggesting that areas where the ancient subsurface is exposed might be good places to look for evidence of past life. We don't know if Elon Musk or somebody else is going to launch in 2020. That's what they've been talking about. We're only 3 months from the end of 2018, as hard as that is to believe. We will soon be in 2019. And Elon Musk and others have said that there could be, not definite, but there could be a launch to Mars in 2020. Since this discovery decades ago of ancient river channels and lake beds on Mars, scientists have been provoked and tantalized by the possibility that the red planet may once have hosted life. But while evidence of past water activity is unmistakable on Mars, it is not clear how much of Martian water actually flowed on the surface. There have been papers estimating that there might have been an ocean in one of the hemispheres. Something hit Mars, may have knocked one of the hemispheres in, so that's why there is this uneven balance between the two hemispheres. So it might have been a catastrophic event when there was a lot of water and something may have hit Mars. And the student at Brown University says the question then becomes, quote, what was the nature of that subsurface life, if it existed, and where did it get its energy? So we know that radiolysis helps to provide energy for underground microbes on Earth. So what they are doing in the Brown University research is trying to see from the data they are getting there and comparing it to what we know about Earth, paralleling what could be a process for life on Mars as it has been here on the Earth. And then the next step was to estimate how much water would have been available for radiation to zap on Mars. Geological evidence suggests there would have been plenty of groundwater bubbling about in porous rocks of the ancient Martian crust. The researchers at Brown University used measurements of the density of the Martian crust to estimate roughly how much of the space where there are pores would have been available for water to fill up underground on Mars, where there have also been the solar system's largest volcano, Olympus Mons, is there with huge lava tubes that are running underground there as well. And then the student at Brown University, he used geothermal and climate models to determine where there might be a sweet spot for potential life on Mars, that it can't be so cold that it would always be frozen in ice, but it also can't be overheated by the planet's core or ancient volcanoes. And then combining all of that work, he ends up saying that the findings would suggest that the amount of subsurface hydrogen available for energy on Mars actually goes up under the extremely cold climate. That's because a thick layer of ice above the habitable zone serves as a lid on Mars that helps keep hydrogen from escaping from the subsurface. So even though Mars is a different planet with a different climate, it may actually serve to keep hydrogen and maybe microbes underground. And now they're looking at, they said the mission of the 2020 rover is to look for signs of past life, areas where you may have remnants of this underground habitable zone, which may have been the largest habitable zone on Mars. And that will be one of the targets for one of the rover missions in 2020, as we are finding more and more data on Earth to guide us in what to look for on Mars in searches for life. I find this to be such an exciting time to be alive if we could just get past all of the lies about what has happened on our own planet. And if we all got on the same square that we're not alone in the universe, that life is something that is not confined just to Earth, and that our search in exobiology for other planets in our own solar system, that Mars may still have microbes, that Enceladus could have swimming creatures in its ocean, and all of the exploration and the newscasts that are going to start coming in this next decade, maybe directly from Mars, depending upon what kind of technology we get based there, because it's 3 minutes and 20 seconds one way for light to travel between Earth and Mars, and then 3 minutes and 20 seconds back. So this is doable in terms of communication that could become faster and faster, and that we will start getting 6 o'clock news about that eerie red planet that we have all wondered about for so long in our lives in the 20th and the 21st centuries, but has been written about with so many questions in ancient literature, leaving Mars to be probably the most mysterious planet in our solar system. What was there? Has life underground always existed? And are we going to find it in the next 2 to 5 years? So, on that note, tonight, I hope that you feel as exhilarated as I do about some of these breakthroughs that are coming in science, and that we will swing the pendulum next week into some of the more difficult subjects having to do with what the updates are on some of the mutilation and the observatory headlines. But tonight, in this beautiful, beautiful evening here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, without rain, wind, thunder, and lightning, I am happy to have shared this. And now, Lori, I would love to have questions.
Absolutely. And we have had such great comments tonight as well. I'd like to share one. Kate 566 says, when the truth is no longer deniable, people will look back and see people like Linda as one of the pioneers of the real truth about the world around us.
Oh, thank you so much. I really, I feel like I'm in this frontier and exploring for you and with you. And I appreciate, I'm getting hundreds of emails now every week from people who they want to join in this search. And so to hear these kinds of comments, it makes me feel like we're all sort of together, even if it's in the digital electron world, there is a growing community of all of you and me and others, and it's just a great feeling. So thank you.
And our first question tonight is from Tracy. How do we know the positive, friendly beings from the negative beings?
Oh, that is the question of centuries. When I think back to the very first days and steps where I knew zero and was trying to get to the bottom of the animal mutilations when I was working at the CBS station in Denver, and have told you guys on the YouTube channel about that moment when Sheriff Tex Graves in Sterling, Colorado, after showing me 266 color Polaroid photos that he had taken of bloodless, precise mutilations, and my trying to just absorb what it was that I was looking at. And when the sheriff said to me, Linda, let me save you some time. The perpetrators of the animal mutilations are creatures from outer space. And then I would hear that phrase many more times over the next year from people who were in law enforcement and ranchers. And the immediate question is, anything that would be, quote unquote, mutilating animals on our planet cannot be good, can it? What would be the agenda? How long have they been doing this? Where are they from? Well, now it is 40 years later. 4 decades. I have been trying to answer those questions. I have had military whistleblowers who have died tell me about 2 of them, about their own face-to-face with, in one case, it was what is called an eben, the gray pear-shaped head and gray body, about 5'2". Another described an encounter with a blonde being, said that the blonde being seemed to be terrified of us humans. The eben didn't have any fear of us humans. The ebens are supposed to be some kind of an ally. The blondes are very confusing because they have been described in so many different facets, both through history and by current whistleblowers, as being a form, a blonde, blue-eyed, or gold-eyed form, humanoid form, that can be used, misused by other intelligences to interface with humans on this planet, because the blonde, blue-eyed, white-skinned being is sort of a description through the ages of what humans have related to as angelic beings. So how could a beautiful, angelic-looking, blonde-haired, crystal blue-eyed, or crystal gold-eyed, white skin that even looks a little bit like marble, one man told me, meaning that there's something under the surface, and the surface of the skin is so translucent that whatever's under the skin has a feeling or look. Just think of marble, beautiful, beautiful marble, largely white, but it has patterns of blues in it. And that thinking about humanoid forms being able to be used as camouflage to move around on our planet, among us, influencing us, monitoring humans, terraforming, harvesting genetic material. You can make an argument for sinister. You can make an argument for interaction and monitoring in order to help guide without being front and center in human civilization. And then is a bigger box, and that is when whistleblowers say there's an Earth secret war. It's been described to me that there are 3 geopolitical groups of non-humans who have been in conflict with each other for at least 270 million years in this solar system. That goes back before the time of the dinosaurs. And that these 3 competing groups that have been described from this source as standing up alligators, standing up lizards, reptilians in one quadrant, some form of a tall, blonde humanoid, and the grays with the pear-shaped heads, and that all of them can make the little androids, the 3 to 4 footers, that in the beginning, in the confusion of humans about the abduction syndrome, think of Betty and Barney Hill, think of cases in Europe where there have been elves and gnomes. Did we lose the signal?
We're back.
Yeah, is everything okay?
Yep, YouTube is still live. Everything's good.
What happened?
We just lost the phone call. Good to go.
Oh, okay. All right. So, where Europe has had history about elves and gnomes, Jacques Vallée did a brilliant book about this in Passport to Magonia, and some of his work looking at, when you go back to the threads of history, that little elves and little gnomes might have been one and the same as little gray guys at the foot of the bed in 2018 in somebody's house somewhere on planet Earth, and that their job has always been to manipulate the mind of humans, do work, taking them out of bedrooms, taking them to craft, extracting sperm, extracting eggs for large agendas that are not fully understood. Now, that is, we'll call that another layer, and what I think is a many, many, many layered, huge substrate here. Because you can then argue, well, if we knew the truth, it could be that there's a relationship between us genetically and the humanoid beings that have been interacting with this planet for millions of years. And that if we knew the truth, that the evolution of Homo erectus up to Homo sapiens sapien and through all the different models, that we have the alien genetics in us as well. And that once you start getting onto that landscape, that we are technically hybrids with something else, you can find that exact story in Genesis in the Bible, where there are intelligences that are supposed to be angelic of some sort, or from someplace else in the universe. Some people call them Nephilim, some people call them angels, and they have the ability to see what is happening with Earth life because somehow they or somebody else has set it in motion here from a double helix DNA molecule that was planted on this planet specifically to turn this watery planet into a laboratory. And that everything and all life has been seeded by that DNA molecule, creating all of these different life forms that something else is monitoring and watching, manipulating, harvesting. Well, if we are linked genetically to some or all of what interacts with the Earth, then maybe if we knew the true, biggest, huge story, maybe it would be something like Earth has been used for a long time as a laboratory to keep evolving different life forms with different intelligences, taking them to other planets that's populating other parts of beyond the Milky Way throughout the universe, And reminds me of something that John Keel told me on an airliner when we were coming back from a conference back, I think it was in the late 80s. And I had asked him what he thought about the grays, the blondes, and the gray beings that are now referred to as ebens. And John looked at me and he squinted and he said, no, there's just one form of prime, he called it prime, the prime life in this universe. It's all humanoid, Linda. All of these other types. Don't get bogged down. The big thing about other life is that they are humanoid. I don't know that that's true. That's just another facet of the many, many, many layers with which you can look at the facts as we can get them in the human abduction syndrome, whatever people in the whistleblower community of military and intel will say, which can always be lies because their job is counterintelligence usually. But sometimes you learn certain things that help you understand. You certainly begin to understand this much from whistleblowers, that our government has been running scared since the 1940s and World War II, not knowing what they were up against. A government, by definition, is to protect their citizenry. And if you don't know if you're dealing with a threat, what are you dealing with? And in World War II, even though Adolf Hitler was obsessed with the concept of outer space vril craft and allegedly beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed humans or humanoids from a star system, the Aldebaran or Aldebaran star system. Why was he obsessed? Who was manipulating Adolf Hitler to do what he did in what became World War II and ended up being the annihilation of a lot of people in the Jewish Hebrew community for reasons that seem to relate to a concept that Adolf Hitler had about populating the earth with tall, Aryan humanoids. Where did these ideas come from to Homo sapiens sapien? If we knew the source of the information behind political movements and religious movements and various kinds of social movements, we might actually begin to learn someday that humanity and its evolution on a planet that has been used as a laboratory for millions of years forms, it's not just a laboratory of genetics, it is a laboratory of souls. Because in the end, when there's argument and war and conflict about how to live, how to love, how to gather either light or darkness, doesn't that fundamentally come back to the essence of what makes a body function? It isn't the muscles and it isn't the tissue. It's the energy that comes through the DNA and the molecule and the cells. That is the energy of life. It could be, in the big scheme of things, that Earth is a very special planet, watery, a good temperature range, and that we are in a period of time now, a transition going into the end of the 21st century, where humanity is becoming more and more divisive, caught up more and more with what humans look like, instead of what might be the life force in them. And finally, if we could get that headline, we're not alone in this universe, and we could get some honesty, not just from the United States government, but from the Chinese government, the Russian government, the German government, the England government, Brazil, all over the planet, because they've all got pieces of this story, then out of it, instead of concentrating on our differences, Homo sapiens sapien might begin to look at its own survival as dependent upon every single one of us, relating to our fellow human beings, not as male, not as female, not as white, brown, red, yellow, or the Krishna blue. But we might begin relating to ourselves as, I need you on this planet in order for all of us and all of the great animals to survive if we make a priority life, not war. Light, not darkness. Love, not hate. That's my prayer every day. Okay, Lori, how about another question?
You got it. And I'd like to thank everyone for the incredibly generous super chats that they've been sending through all night. Everyone has just been so awesome.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So the next question is in regard to the electric universe theory. What does Linda have to say about it?
When I first heard about the electric universe in depth, I was on a bus in Turkey going to Göbekli Tepe in 2012. And I listened to people who were in great passionate discussion about it on the bus. And I started thinking about one of their tenets of proof of this being an electric universe when they said that the huge canyon, the Val Marineris on Mars, was proof that some kind of solar prominence or electrical, like a huge lightning strike, had hit Mars and caused this big crack. And I'd never heard that before 2012. And when I got back to the United States, there was a physicist, planetary physicist friend of mine here in Albuquerque. And I just took the discussion and some of the literature that I had been given, and I said, is there a possibility that somehow there could be electrical buildup in the solar system that would release like a gigantic lightning strike and be able to make something like the Val Marineris on Mars? And he immediately said, no, nothing works like that. Well, in a compressed way, I'm giving you, I was curious. I had these hypotheses. I went to a physicist who is planetary geologist, in fact, immediately says no. And then how do we, who are not planetary scientists or somebody who is working with electricity to see if there could be some huge buildup and a release that could make big bolts in the solar system. And finally, where I am is I do not know, but I don't personally see that there is an example of some kind of a huge bolt releasing itself in our solar system, certainly not now, and causing canyons, for example. So I'm open to looking at evidence, if there is evidence, but I think that I am personally on the square that the physics of the evolution of the solar system in relationship to a sun that is now we're at 4.5 billion years in a solar system that is supposed to last with a yellow G-spectrum sun for about 9 to 10 billion years. So if you look at the solar system, it's kind of right in the middle age. And it's also projected by physicists, solar physicists, that as we move in the second half of the 9 or 10 billion, the sun will be stable for a period of time, and then somewhere as you get on going down toward the end, it will become more and more unstable, and eventually a yellow G spectrum sun is expected to expand into a big red giant. And once that begins to happen, Venus and the Earth and Mars and the inner planets, they will be consumed by that red giant. And that will be the final end of the matter worlds of this solar system. It's a long way out there. And that's why it seems to me inevitable that there's destiny to consciousness. There's destiny to life forms. Certainly there have been extinctions, lots of extinctions on our planet. And that would signal to me that we're in a universe of entropy and there are extinctions everywhere. But we also see life supported in this universe. It's supported by the underlying physics. It could have gone antimatter, and nothing like this would have existed, and it didn't. So perhaps at the soul level, there is a sense that you have, I have it, that there really is a reason, there is a destiny for why there is consciousness, why we are conscious beings, why we are conscious beings with a life force that I think is related to a soul fabric that does continue on beyond the matter worlds, and that eventually maybe what we are finally going to begin to learn, and I think it would be so exciting that it might do away with war, is that the whole universe is a computer simulation by some kind of extremely advanced intelligence, perhaps even divine, in another dimension that is purposely projecting this universe with a yin and the yang, with entropy, and the challenge of who are we, what do we decide that we do at any level, at any moment, and that all of this, all of these suns going on and on forever, in all these solar systems in this universe, it's just, as physicist Thomas Campbell says, this is one big anti-entropy training ground for souls. I can live with that. It makes life worth living. It makes the struggle to understand the facts and the truth about these subjects that are so confusing and contradicting, and yet, can you think of anything that is more exciting to try to get some understanding about than who are we? Who made us? Who made this universe? Why are we in a universe that appears to have advanced intelligences in it, but they remain secret behind whatever is happening on our planet until, hopefully, we're going to have a public handshake? Just secrecy alone. Why? Why has secrecy of other intelligences and powers and influences always been such an important part of Earth's history? On that note, I'm going to say good night. I really look forward to being with everybody next week for more unveiling of chapters in some of the big UK and sunspot questions, and continuing our discussion together and getting your feedback in Earthfiles at earthfiles.com has become a very, very important part of my life. So thank you, Lori and Michael. Until next week, and hello from Fluffy and Chocolate, wherever they are now.